Welcome to Bitcoins and Gravy, episode 29.
Bitcoins are trading at $495 per Bitcoin. That's 49 cents per millibit, while LTB coin is trading at $0.0006 US dollars per LTB coin. That's 0.06 of a penny.
Now that's gravy. Welcome to Bitcoins and Gravy, and thanks for joining us today as we podcast from East Nashville, Tennessee. I'm John Barrett.
And I'm Lid Shaw.
We're two Bitcoin enthusiasts who love to talk about Bitcoins.
And share what we learn with you, the listener. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for listening to Bitcoins and Gravy.
On today's show, we talk with one of our favorite people in the Bitcoin space, James DAngelo. James DAngelo is the charismatic host of the World Bitcoin Network, an educational channel on YouTube dedicated entirely to cryptocurrencies. The World Bitcoin Network provides all of us with technical, educational, and philosophical content in exploring the full range of the Bitcoin revolution.
We also speak with Jonathan Chester, the founder, chief strategic officer, and compliance officer of Bitwage.co. Based out of Palo Alto, California, Bitwage is the first formal Bitcoin payroll service. Bitwage allows employees to both receive a wage and pay for goods and services in Bitcoin. Through Bitwage, Bitcoin users no longer need to have a bank account in order to enter the Bitcoin space or get paid for their hard work. Bitwage is modernizing the payroll experience by leveraging next-generation payment protocols such as Bitcoin to reduce payroll costs, increase transfer speeds, and have access to payroll tools that cannot be accessed through traditional means.
Today, Lidge and I have in the studio someone we have wanted to have on the show for a very long time, and that is James DAngelo with the World Bitcoin Network.
Welcome to the show, James.
Yeah, it's an honor. I loved the last show. You had the guy in Singapore.
Oh, yeah.
And he was talking about this amazing community he was developing. And I was thinking how a year ago that would have been on the top of Reddit for a week.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, indeed.
Well, you spent a lot of time overseas, too. I remember hearing you speak about that on one of your video interviews.
Yeah, I live a lot in Italy, have some contact with the Bitcoiners over there. And my wife is Ugandan. I met her in Uganda. And so there's been a lot of excitement about the goings-ons in East Africa.
Wow, that's neat. And we're talking to you today. You're in Boston, right?
Yeah, back in the home country.
Okay, wow. And you spend a lot of time in Italy. Man, I envy you. Sounds great, doesn't it, Lidge?
Yeah, I want to go buy my espresso with Bitcoin over there.
I'm telling you, man. Wow.
Yeah, I used to go there to put on weight, and now I try and avoid it.
James, you know, we love your show because you're not interviewing people like we are and wasting everybody's time, but but you're right. You're right there, educating people right there in front of the camera, and it's, you know, you're just a joy to watch, honestly, and I've learned so much from your show.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, I'm lucky that the Boston community is pretty good. I went to the last MIT hackathon. They're there every week running this hackathon with free food, and they bring in, you know, we've had guys from blockchain.info, we've had guys from Circle, and last night was LeetCoin, which are these gamers developing stuff. So you get a really great level of, you know, sort of broad interaction. And that's what keeps me up to date, really.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Ultimately, the true value of Bitcoin is whether or not you can get food with it, isn't it? Isn't that the very essence of it?
Man, you can't beat that. You don't even have to. Yeah, you don't even have to spend your Bitcoin, right? You just go and get the free food.
You know, when I was looking at colleges, I actually went and spent a night at an MIT fraternity and hung out with a couple of the students there. And I think they were freshmen. They were getting ready for class. They had to go to this classroom, and they came back with a brown paper bag, like a grocery bag, just full of electronics and parts. And it looked like Lego supplies of electronics. And, you know, it was brilliant people there. I mean, they had to take this stuff and figure out how to build, you know, a rocket ship to take them to the moon. To our listeners out there, unfortunately, we were dealing with some Skype issues or some kind of sound craziness going on in the ether sphere there. Oh, I shouldn't say ether. That's not...
You'll get knocked down by the Bitcoin moderators.
Yeah. So anyway, James has been kind enough to switch over to his cell phone, and his voice is going to change for the rest of the interview.
So James, lots of things going on in the Bitcoin world right now. Is there anything that you have that's pressing on your mind, or anything that you'd like to talk to us about? You know pretty much everything that's going on. Lead us on to victory here, man.
Well, one thing that I realized, which is kind of related to our previous comment about the guy in Singapore, which is, I would say in November, you almost felt like you could understand everything going on in the Bitcoin sphere. So you could kind of just read up and catch up and talk about any particular activity. That's no longer possible at all. It's not even possible in the MIT hackathon. So there's 45 people there all working on different projects. Just to understand the scope of each of their projects in our little room is no longer within the capabilities of any individual. So you end up saying, I don't know a lot. Clearly, John, you and I have spoken recently about the Lawsky stuff, but the other kind of exciting thing is just a couple nights ago it was announced that I was a finalist at a competition, at a different type of competition at MIT for solving global climate change, with a proposal that I put in that is entirely based off of public ledgers and Bitcoin.
Oh, wow.
And so that's been really exciting, and I've been getting a lot of attention just for that.
Was your proposal particularly technical, or was it a little bit more conceptual? I mean, what is your comfort with technology and coding and computers and that sort of thing?
Well, I'm a double E, so I actually did some time at MIT myself. I did some master's work there, was working on this NASA project, but that's, it's a good 25 years ago, and I kind of jumped out and have been a lot into the world of conservationalism, and coming back to it now with sort of this new technological hook, which is the Bitcoin public ledger, makes it really fun because you now have a new tool in your wheelhouse to sort of, pop onto any problem. And I don't know if it's true that a guy with a hammer sees all problems as nails. So maybe I'm just applying this willy-nilly, but it seems to show some promise, and I'm getting some great feedback with that.
Well, that's very cool. Would you like to share some of this proposal with us on the show?
There's a really fun aspect of it, which is, for good reason, most people walking in the U.S. don't know much about cap and trade, which is the idea that you limit the amount of carbon that can be spewed out in the atmosphere, and then you trade it. And this is an idea proposed by the Republicans, strangely. It's the best tool that anyone's really conceived of. So if you go to any big climate negotiation, cap and trade's the centerpiece technology or idea for stopping climate change. The trouble is the cap has always been set by the government, boo hiss, and the trade has always been done between corporations, boo hiss. Using Bitcoin public ledgers, and I think that's a big reason why you find a lot of Republican and right-wing pushback against climate change. It has more to do with politics, probably, than the fact that the weather's changing, which most of us kind of feel in our bones at this day and age. And so you get a lot of spin based on that, and maybe they're right. For me, I really don't care if the science is right, or I don't want to argue that. But I think there's a really interesting thing that can be done if we change sort of the centralized points there. So what if we took the trading and gave it to every person on Earth, very similar to Bitcoin, and launch it in some way similar to how Stellar, I don't know if you followed Stellar at all, this new cryptocurrency.
No.
From the guy of Ripple. Please sign on now and get your free Stellar.
Oh, yeah, I got my free 5,000.
That's all you need. But what was beautiful is they had to deal with the idea of having everyone get an individual amount, right? You, John, didn't end up with 70,000 because you gamed the system. You were pretty much limited to 5,000. And people at the MIT hackathon are like, I'll buy your Stellar off of you today.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So they used Facebook's login to basically say, we're open to everybody. And so only in the last couple of years could you really conceivably give equal shares to everybody on Earth. And that's kind of what I was proposing to do, which is to give equal carbon emission shares to everybody on Earth, and then have a trade among themselves. So we've eliminated government and we've eliminated corporation, and the regulation itself would be similar to eBay, which is, hey, this company doesn't look like they're doing a great job at buying their shares. Let's bombard them a little bit with internet traffic and see if they respond by buying these ostensibly really cheap shares at the beginning. That's the summary of the idea, and really there's not much more than that. Clearly on day one, you haven't stopped global climate change, but if something like this takes off according to Metcalfe's law, where each additional user provides more security and makes the system stronger, then you could have something pretty exciting.
But you have credits, you have like carbon credits, right?
Right. And if you're a massive polluter, the government would hand you a lot of credits. And then the system would start from there, which I think is a little back-ass work.
You have to spend money and buy credits from somewhere else if you want to be doing more polluting, right?
Right. In the current schemes, and they are running, so Europe has one, there's one in California. In the current schemes, if you want to pollute more, you have to buy from other corporations, or you have to harass the government. Both work, sadly.
Yeah, sadly. That's craziness.
So in our system, and it's kind of fun because this year all of humanity put out about 8 gigatons. Giga is just another word for billion. So there's about 8 billion people on Earth, and there's 8 billion tons. So each person would be given the access to 1 ton, and then they can do what they want with it. And it is some fun stuff. So I've played around a lot with people about that. Some cool economists are chiming in, and we're trying to scheme it and dial it just right. So it's just been fun.
That's fascinating, James. I think that people are used to looking at those carbon credits as something that seems suspect or outside of their control, and people just sort of feel like, yeah, that's sort of like a kind of a bullshit way.
Voter incentive to be involved is zero because everything happens on a trapeze over the public's head.
Right.
Exactly.
It's as if climatologists forgot Magna Carta, right? It's the most powerful force in human history are incentivized masses, not incentivized corporations, strangely. And so Congress has a real hard time with this because they do need voter turnout to push some of these things around. But if no one even wants to hear about it, right? You want to hear about it if someone's like, sign on and you'll get $4, right? Well, that's kind of curious, right? But you don't want to if you can't do anything in the system at all. The beauty of Bitcoin is that it's completely open. So guys like you and me are getting involved instead of, once again, Peter Thiel and all the SEC vetted investors who get to play around with all the cool ideas. And the reason we're all at Bitcoin Hackathon and the goofy, loser, crazy characters we are is that it's been open to everyone. And we're seeing people go from, loser to absolute winner, or from nobody to a real popular person and respected person, right? Andreas Antonopoulos, if Bitcoin is controlled by the SEC, is still someone no one knows.
That's right.
Right.
So it's really important that you incentivize little people. And, the government kind of forgets that. It's really easy to just come down and say, this is how it will be. That's the easiest system. It's very hard to incentivize people.
Yeah.
Well, I still think what you described as your proposal is a pretty incredible concept. So, we are also used to the idea of this concept that the environment and, when we don't treat the world right, we're trading away our next generation, our grandchildren's future.
Correct.
And you're making that literal. You're saying if you have, a billion or what is it?
Each person really would get 1 ton to trade in the system.
Right. So if you have a ton of carbon credits and you want to trade them away, you are literally choosing whether or not to trade away your grandchildren's future and how you choose to do that.
Right. It gives you a vote, and if you don't like to vote, it gives you an income, right? Both are really good incentives for protecting the environment, right? The tragedy of the commons is when there's no ownership. So you have the public lake, right?
That's right.
Where everyone goes and pollutes and fishes out of, and the private lake, which is really pristine. And the ownership difference changes everyand
Yeah, I'm amazed at how short-sighted politicians are. Sometimes I think maybe they don't actually have any grandchildren, because and the same thing for corporate America, corporations generally, and I don't mean all of them, of course, but it just sometimes